Good afternoon. At the MIT Media Lab, researchers from my group are on a mission to develop a new model for the critical systems to create more livable, responsive cities. Now, this is so critical because we live in a period of extreme urbanization. In fact, 90% of the population growth from here on out will take place in cities. But even more interesting to me is almost all the innovation will take place in cities. Something like 93% of patents are expected to take place in cities. But the world is not flat in this respect. Innovation takes place in a limited number of innovation cities, mostly on the coast of the US, Northern Europe, a few cities in Asia. So we ask ourselves, what enables innovative, entrepreneurial, high-performance cities? There's a lot of good social science out there that tells you that innovation is the result of social ties that are strong and deep. This little diagram shows people in a workplace. Some people are isolated. They tend to be not very productive and innovative. Some people are hyper-connected. They are the most innovative and productive in the organization. The same applies at the scale of the community, extending to the city. Now, we think there are a number of things that need to come together to enable innovation. First of all, you need sufficient density. You just need a critical mass of people who are gathered together and interacting on a regular basis. This is not only residential density, employment density, et cetera. Proximity is key. That just means you need to put things in the right place so people have a chance to bump into each other and interact. And diversity is key. Not only demographic diversity, but diversity of enterprises, big companies, small companies, research facilities, housing diversity, et cetera. Now, you can have a lot of problems if you crank up the density. You can have crime, loss of contact with nature, pollution, congestion. So we're studying these urban systems that allow you to have the good things without the bad things with density, and that's what we're here to talk about. That's most of the work of our research group. Now, if you do it right, we believe you will increase the quality of life, you'll increase the innovation potential, which basically means jobs and GDP, and you will increase sustainability, which we think of as resource consumption per capita. Most new cities are not doing very well in bringing these three things together. This is Dubai, where I was a few months ago. It's very high density, but very low social diversity, so you don't get the kind of mixing that leads to innovation. This is a favela I was in Rio last year. Again, very high density, low social diversity, very little innovation. Kendall Square, where we work, doesn't really have the right kind of density. It has very high job density, but a very low residential density. It's dead at night and on weekends. There have been articles about the problems of innovation cities. They tend to be pricing the young people, the lifeblood of the cities, out of the market. This is a recent article about how cities are becoming bland and boring because all the young people are having to move outside of the city. So one of our projects, the City Home project, I first presented 2 years ago at TEDxBoston. It was responding to this trend to create micro units so housing is affordable for young people. This was Mayor Bloomberg's apartment that he was advocating, 300 square feet, pull-out sofa bed, about 3 feet of closet space. We thought we could do better. I showed this video a couple of years ago. This was an animation, which is quite easy to do. It was simply showing how you can take a relatively small space and introduce transformation, robo-walls and other transformable elements so it cycles through many different functions. The process of defining your space is delineating the activities you want, and then the components are installed. That, of course, wasn't enough. We had to see if we could make that work. So we here are looking at transformable elements, walls that can be just moved as easily as opening a door, tables and beds that go up and down, convert a living room to a playroom. A couple of months ago at the Media Lab, we said, well, we can go farther than that. We can shrink an apartment down to 200 square feet, and in that apartment have a queen-size bed, okay? And with a simple gesture, and by the way, none of this is fake, this all worked. You could open it up and have a dining space for 6 people, a workspace with an 8-foot counter. We actually are able to open it up to have a living room for about 6 people. We have a very tiny bathroom in the normal configuration, but you can open the bathroom up to have a large walk-in space to take a shower in the room. We're also looking at different ways of controlling the technology, gesture and voice, et cetera. And of course, MIT students are party animals, so they had to have party mode. Okay. A new focus, we did not discuss this at the last talk, is our CityFARM project. With climate change, depletion of the aquifer, polluted farmland, droughts as far as we can see, we believe that we need to find a new model for feeding people in the cities that's scalable and industrial food production at the point of consumption. Caleb Harper is here to talk about that.
Thanks, Kent. Let's do a quick food education. These countries are considered food secure, meaning they produce enough food to feed their local population. Unfortunately, the rest of the world is in varying degrees of food insecurity with unpredictable supply lines, vulnerable to climate change. Food security is especially acute in these under-resourced countries that are also leveraged for food production of wealthier countries, meaning they set up farms there and ship the food home. Overlay that with the complex picture of import-export food lines in the world, and we begin to see a picture of a very fragile food system connected by strings. As these strings are stressed through natural limits of resource, they'll begin to snap. Those snaps represent economic disasters, human tragedies, and even war. Cities currently have majorly 2 food systems, an industrialized remote agriculture system and a small-scale local production system. We're questioning, what about the scale in between? Shouldn't cities have something that produces a whole lot of food right where it's eaten? So to do that, we looked for space-constrained environments and innovation like the Mir space station. On Mir, NASA developed a technology called aeroponics that mists root systems rather than standing water or soil. This reduces the amount of water by about 90% that you need to use, but also creates an incredible amount of food in a small space. So what does this mean? Across the bottom is days to maturity, and across the other side are crop types. We call this a harvest index. Focus on broccoli. So in 1 square foot of the ground, if you have all the water, all the minerals, all the sun that you need, and no pests, you can produce 3 heads of broccoli. Using NASA data to project, in the same square foot with aeroponics, we can produce about 18 heads of broccoli. So let's put this in the city. We're 3 versus 18. Take it up 1 story. So in the same square foot, but just 1 story high, we can produce 54 heads of broccoli where we're producing 3. Let's go extreme. So we take 1 square foot of Hancock Tower all the way up, and we can produce 3,000 heads of broccoli in the same place we could produce 3 before. This is usually where people say something like, yeah, okay, but prove it. Well, in the demo or die mantra of the Media Lab, we did just that. This was our first square foot growing prototype that we built. But 1 square foot's not going to be enough to make a dent in a city, so we kept going up. This is a 60 square foot room in which we had LEDs and basic sensing and vertical growing apparatus. In this 300 square feet, we were able to feed about 300 members of the Media Lab once a month and make local food donations. You can see from the bright white roots and the incredible green color that this is fresh, amazing produce, and the first time that many people in the Media Lab had ever ripped the roots off their own food, which is quite an experience. So growing in the closet was fun at MIT, but we wanted to bring this out to the rest of the world and design a platform for sharing. So on the facade of the Media Lab, we now have a farm imbued with network sensing, giving us constant feedback about the climate we're creating within. By optimizing the climate, we can provide a space for any seed to do what it does best, which is grow. Also, like a winemaker, we can start approaching the values that go into that seed, like carbon dioxide, humidity, heat, light, to change things like flavor and texture in a whole new way, now from seed. So what we imagine in the future, cities, countries won't be connected by lines at all. They'll have a new form of networked intelligence and data sharing. So beyond this vision of the future, we hope over the next year in our new deploy or die mantra to bring a mirror facility of our work at MIT to all of these countries to form the backbone of a global research collective around food. So on the left, you see a 1950s mainframe, and on the right, you see our lab at MIT. What if you knew 50 years ago where computers would be today? Because that's the exact trajectory we're on with food right now. And we're not very far into the future of new urban food systems.
So we've come to realize that cars kill interaction, private cars kill interaction. Therefore, private cars kill innovation. Ryan Chin is here to tell us about our Mobility on Demand project.
Great, thank you, Kent. I introduced the city car at the first TEDxBoston. The city car is an electric, shared, two-passenger vehicle designed for cities. In fact, the vehicle is so maneuverable that you can park it in very tight space and egress directly onto the sidewalk. We can fit 3 cars in 1 parking space when folded. From that, we advanced into a prototype stage where we deployed this in Europe. In fact, we developed the prototype to the point where it meets EU regulations for road safety. More recently, we've created a new vehicle called the Persuasive electric vehicle. It's a 3-wheeled electric assist vehicle that persuades you to get some exercise as you go to work. In fact, we've incorporated a pedal electric system so that as you start to pedal, you use an electric motor that's in the back in combination with your own power. The PEV itself uses 2 wheels in the front and 1 in the back that provides stability. It also incorporates a retractable rain screen to protect you from the weather. It's designed for bicycle lanes in terms of dimension, size, and weight. The PEV itself, like the city car, moves people around. But at the same time, we're able to convert it into a package delivery system during off-peak hours. And here you can see we've designed it to easily interface with loading docks so that you can offload and unload packages. Walkable neighborhoods, biking, transit are all key building blocks for a mass transit system within cities to make the city sustainable. We've designed the city car and the PEV to fit as part of the shared economy. We've also designed an electric bicycle and an electric scooter called a robo-scooter to fit within what we call a mobility on-demand system. With the swipe of your smartphone, you can get access to any one of these different modes. But with this, you can also do things like asymmetric trips. You can go to the supermarket by walking, but then come home in a city car with your groceries. But in the end, though, an on-demand multimodal system like this isn't enough to change our urban future. What we'd like to do now is introduce autonomous or self-driving vehicles to change the entire system itself. What I'll show you now is a simulation of private automobiles in Kendall Square. And in fact, when you start to look at this simulation, you'll notice here that the red represents all the parking spaces required to house all the vehicles that we actually own today. Focus here now on that circle. That's an intersection where we have lots of congestion. That's because humans aren't really synchronized with lights. We create traffic jams because of that. We're not coordinated when we drive. As we start to move into shared mobility, we use less vehicles. Of course, we also use less cars. With autonomous technology, where we have vehicle-to-vehicle communication, coordination between drivers, we can improve our throughput efficiency. We also maximize the utilization of the vehicle itself and parking as well. You can see we can nearly eliminate all parking required for all these autonomous vehicles that are floating around in the space of the city. With this new technology and the introduction of shared autonomous vehicles, we can imagine a compact, walkable city where we can have the urban density that we want, but also reduce the congestion to nearly 0.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. So we've been working on these systems for many years. We realized about a year ago that that was not enough, that what we needed was a tool that would allow us to understand how all of these systems came together that could help in the decision-making in the design process. Ira Winder is here to tell us about our CityScope project.
Thank you, Kent. At the lab, we imagine a future for planning where stakeholders can use playful tools to actually drive collaboration. And we think these tools, in particular, are good at looking at urban complexity. Looking at dynamic models with augmented reality will help us look at models like this in many layers of information. For instance, this white Lego model of Kendall Square, our campus, can show many layers of digital data. For instance, when you see this model for the first time, we might show you real satellite imagery of the site, so you can look at the streets and the facades of the city and orient yourself. This visualization of autonomous vehicle networks will actually let you imagine the future of autonomous vehicles like Ryan has described. And this will also help you look and strategize where the infrastructure for wireless systems might be deployed in the city. Daylight simulations and solar radiation simulations will show you where solar energy might be best placed in the city, or urban farms like Caleb has described. A wind flow simulation for a place like Boston is important if you want to not create gusty corridors through your plaza. But not just the physics of daylight and wind, we want to look at the physics of humans. So that's why we look at innovation in the square, the intensity and diversity of businesses, in particular venture capital. Overlaid with social media information like Twitter in real time, we get a very granular look at the city and how it's organized. But we don't want to just look at the data. We want our users to interact with the models. We want them to be able to make changes to the city and predict the future. Through scanning and colored Legos interaction and sliders, we make that possible. As an example, we worked with a developer recently in Australia to make a rapid prototyping interface for land use planning. The stakeholders can use colored Legos, red and blue, to mock up land use of jobs, amenities, homes. And in real time, the system is scanned and fed into an agent-based model. The agents of jobs and amenities and residents are then fed into a walkability analysis in real time that tells you the probability that an agent can make a walkable trip. And what's cool is you can move the slider down, experiment with taking away half the jobs, and see how that might affect your walkability. So the cool thing about this project is when we made it for this particular case study, we realized it could be applied to many other cases. You can make up your own city. You could compare it to another city. And we also strive to digitize our information in parallel so that when users are interacting with these models, we can export live feeds of data to people outside of the room or pass on the data to experts who can keep refining the analysis. So right now we see a situation where lots of big cities have big, static, expensive models that we don't think are doing the public much good. So we imagine a future with dynamic, tangible models that people can use. And we're trying our best to give that to a city near you.
Hey. Thank you, Ira. So I return to this question: what enables innovative, entrepreneurial, high-performance cities? We know this doesn't work. Designing for machines, starting with technology, it's much better to design for people. I mean, this is how you could get to livable, creative cities. We think that compact, diverse, walkable communities with strong social ties enabled by these new urban systems equals innovation, and you'll get your eco-city, your green city, your sustainable city, et cetera. By the way, I've spoken at conferences with all those titles. You'll get that by default. Don't start there. Start with people, because remember, cities are for people. They're not for machines. Just add technology when it's useful. Thank you.